The night over Rome had always carried a kind of ancient quiet, the kind that made people feel watched by the ruins, the history, the ghosts of centuries long gone. But on this particular night, the silence felt heavier, as if the city was holding its breath for something waiting beneath its foundations. Dr. Alina Maresi stood at the edge of an excavation pit outside the old Roman Forum, her hands cold despite the humid air, her mind silently telling her that tonight's work would not be ordinary. She didn't know why she felt it. She only knew that the soil itself seemed to tremble with secrets. "Hey guys," she whispered into her recorder, her voice barely steady. "Today's story is something darker than anything I've ever touched." She took a deep breath and climbed down into the pit, where her assistant Luca was already brushing away layers of compacted earth. He'd been quiet for the last few minutes, sign Alina had learned to recognize. Silence always meant he had found something. "Alina." "Look," Luca murmured, his voice strangely hollow. Alina crouched beside him, her fingers brushing soil away until she felt something smooth and cold beneath the dirt. When the earth gave way, the pale shape appeared under the lantern light. A skull. But it wasn't the skull itself that made her breath catch. It was the iron ring hammered directly into the bone, an ugly, ruthless ring, forged without care for the person it once belonged to. The crack that stretched across the crown gave the skull the appearance of having been struck violently, maybe more than once. The jaw was slightly twisted, as if the final expression of the person it belonged to was one of agony. Alina swallowed hard. Bones were familiar to her. Skulls were normal. This one was not. When she lifted it with gloved hands, a chill swept through the pit, so sudden and sharp it felt like someone had brushed an icy palm across the back of her neck. The lantern flickered. Luca's breath hitched. "Alina, what the hell was that?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the ground where the skull had rested. In the lantern light, something metallic glimmered beneath the soil. A chain. A thick, rusted iron chain partly buried, the rest disappearing into the depths of the pit, as if it descended into the earth itself. Alina felt her throat tighten. This wasn't a burial. Romans didn't bind skulls. They didn't bury chains connected to the dead. As she brushed more soil away, the cold deepened. The air felt heavier, thicker, tasting faintly of iron and something bitter. She followed the chain's length, until suddenly, violently, the chain jerked. A metallic shudder echoed beneath the ground, like something tugging from below. Luca stumbled backward, pale. "Did you see that?" "Alina." The chain moved. "It actually stay calm," she said automatically, though her heart hammered so loud it drowned out the night. She knelt again, brushing more soil away, her hands trembling. Bones didn't move. Chains didn't move. But something in the earth moved them. The chain jerked again, harder this time, sending a pulse of cold air spiraling through the pit. Alina felt it hit her chest like a faint heartbeat that did not belong to her. "We need to uncover the rest," she whispered, even though every inch of her body screamed to stop. "We need to understand what this is." Hours passed. The deeper they dug, the stranger everything felt. The air lost warmth. Their lantern flames wavered as if gasping for oxygen. The chain led them to a cracked stone slab buried under centuries of soil. Strange symbols were burned into its surface-sharp angular lines, carved with fire, not tools. Alina ran her fingers over them and felt a vibration beneath her skin, like a faint energy still trapped in the stone. "Alina, this looks like a warning," Luca whispered. She nodded slowly. "Or a seal." They lifted the slab, Dirt poured into the space beneath it, revealing a smaller chamber. Inside was another skull jaw, locked open in a silent scream. Bone fingers curled in desperate claw marks along the walls. Whoever had been buried here had tried to escape, tried hard. Luca gagged. This isn't archaeological. This is torture. Alina found a clay capsule near the bones. When she cracked it open, a rolled parchment fell into her hand, miraculously preserved. It held one line: "Bind the cursed, or the cursed will bind us." Before she could process the words, the lanterns flickered violently, then died, plunging the chamber into total darkness. A sound rose from deep below, a breath, a groan, a stirring. The chain rattled, metal striking stone like it was being pulled from the depths. Luca screamed for her to run. Alina grabbed his arm, dragging him upward as the ground shook beneath them. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Something was awakening. Above ground, the camp was deathly quiet, but the chain in the pit still trembled, the metal straining as if something was trying to climb up. Alina forced herself to look down again. The soil near the chain bulged, cracked. A skeletal hand burst through, thin, withered, wrapped in rusted shackles. It clawed upward, dragging with it the rest of the partially decomposed body, bound in iron ribs, twisted, chest cut open with self-made scratch marks, but its head was missing. It was looking for the skull. "Alina," Luca whispered, shaking. "Throw it away. Do something." But Alina stood frozen. The skull in her hands felt warmer now, alive. The creature's broken form rose, but it did not move with rage, moved with hunger for completion. Its shackled arms reached toward her, toward the skull, as if pleading. "Alina, run," Luca shouted. The creature lurched. Luca shoved Alina aside, and the skull fell, rolling near the pit's edge. The creature's blind, twisted form staggered toward it, drawn like metal to a magnet. But Alina acted first. She grabbed a fragment of the burned stone slab and held it tightly. The symbols on it glowed faintly. "What are you doing?" Luca yelled. "Stopping it," she whispered. She pressed the burning symbol fragment to the creature's chest. A shockwave burst outward. Chains wrapped around the creature like snakes. The earth split open and dragged it, screaming, into the pit. Alina collapsed. The skull rolled to her. She could feel it pulse with a heartbeat that didn't belong to the living. The chain beneath the earth fell silent. For a moment, the world felt still, but the skull trembled. A faint whisper echoed in her mind, unfinished. And as the first light of dawn touched the excavation site, Alina realized something horrifying. The body wasn't the curse, the skull was, and it wasn't done yet. The skull trembled again, a faint vibration against the soil, as if it were breathing, slow, deliberate, patient. Alina stared at it, her pulse thundering in her ears. The air around it seemed to bend, warping with an invisible heat, but the morning was cold, and the pit lay in complete stillness. Luca grabbed her arm. "We need to leave, now." But Alina didn't move. Something inside her felt anchored to that skull. Not fascination, not scientific curiosity. Something deeper, darker, as if a thread from the skull was tightening around her ribs, pulling softly, insistently, whispering, "You found me. Finish what they couldn't." "Alina," Luca said sharply, shaking her. "You're bleeding." She touched her nose, her fingers came back, smeared with blood. When she blinked, a rush of dizziness overtook her, and the world tilted. She stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the pit. The skull rolled again, as though reacting to her imbalance, reacting to her weakness, no responding. "I felt it," she whispered. It's connected to her, or to something inside her. Luca was practically dragging her away now, but Alina twisted free. Wait, something's still down there. No, look at you. Whatever that thing was, you sealed it. It's over. But Alina knew instantly he was wrong. She could feel it, a presence, a pulse. The earth had closed, but something beneath remained awake, listening. The curse was not sealed. It had shifted, and it was inside the skull. The whisper returned, soft as breath against her ear. They bound me. You will free me. Alina backed away, her heart racing. She heard footsteps, approaching members of the team, returning to the dig site for the morning shift. She didn't want them near the pit. She didn't want them near it. Cover it, she told Luca quickly. Cover everything. No one touches the skull. No one. What about you? He asked, breathless. Alina swallowed hard. I'll take it to the lab. No, Luca said instantly. Alina, we should bury it, destroy it, throw it in the Tiber something. You saw what happened, she said quietly. It wants to be whole. If we lose it, the only way to stop it is to understand it. Luca looked at her with helpless desperation. Or it understands you first. Alina didn't answer. She wrapped the skull in a cloth, placed it gently in her field case, and locked it. But even through the metal, she could still feel it, faint warmth, like a living organism. The ride back to the research facility was suffocating. Cars honked, streets bustled, Rome continued its usual rhythm. Oblivious to the ancient heartbeat now sitting in the back seat of Elena's car. At a red light, Elena glanced into the rearview mirror. The case shifted, just a fraction of an inch. Her breath hitched. Luca, did you see that? He stared at the case. Wide-eyed. Please tell me you didn't just let that thing loose in your car. It's locked, she said, trying to steady her voice. It can't open by itself, but deep down she wasn't convinced. At the facility, they carried the case to the underground lab cold rooms, reinforced with stone walls, a place meant for fragile antiquities. Alina unlocked the case. The skull sat motionless, empty eye sockets staring upward, until the lights flickered. A cold gust swept the room, and the skull turned. Not much, just a fraction of a rotation, but enough for both of them to jump back. Alina, Luca's voice cracked. This isn't science. This is, look, she pointed with trembling fingers. There's something engraved inside the bone. She lifted the skull carefully, angling it toward the lab light. Inside the hollow cavity, faint inscriptions curled along the inner surface like a message carved from the inside out. A language she didn't recognize. A language she felt. The symbols pulsed faintly, like veins lighting beneath thin skin. Alina, Luca whispered. It's glowing. The room dimmed. A humming filled the airlow, rhythmic, ancient. The skull warmed in her hands, not painfully, but with a steady, human warmth. Then the whisper returned, this time clearer, threading straight into her skull. Find the rest of me, before he does. Alina staggered, dropping the skull onto the table. It didn't crack, it didn't even roll. It simply landed upright, staring at her. Luca grabbed her shoulders. What did it say to you? Alina shook her head violently. Nothing. I don't know. But she did know, before he does. Who was he? As if answering her silent question, every monitor in the lab flickered and went black. The central screen blinked once, then displayed a security camera feed one they had not switched on. It wasn't the pit. It was the corridor outside the lab. A tall silhouette stood motionless, facing the door. Long, emaciated limbs, head bowed forward, something metallic glinting around its wrists. Luca froze. Alina, is that? The figure lifted its head slowly, mechanically. Its eye sockets were hollow. Its chest caved. Its bones cracked with the sound of stone splitting. It was the body they had sent back into the earth. But now, it was walking toward the lab. Alina, the skull, Luca yelled. The skull was trembling violently now, rattling across the table, as though trying to move toward the door. Alina grabbed it, but a shock of searing cold burst into her palms, forcing her to drop it. The lights blew out glass, shattering overhead, plunging the lab into sudden, suffocating darkness. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, slow, dragging, unmistakably inhuman. Alina, Luca whispered, his voice breaking. It's coming. And the whisper inside her mind whispered again, urgent, trembling. If he finds me, he takes you to. Laab's door handle began to turn. Alina's heartbeat thundered. She didn't think. She grabbed the skull, ignoring the freezing pain, and sprinted to the back exit. Luca followed, breath ragged. Behind them, the lab door creaked open. A dry whisper scraped through the darkness. Give it back. Alina didn't look back. She ran. Through the corridor, up the stairwell, pushing through heavy fire doors that groaned with her force. The emergency lights flickered, weak red, as alarms began to wail. Rome outside was bright and warm, but it felt wrong, like stepping from a nightmare into a dream that didn't belong to her. Alina, where are we going? Luca gasped. She clutched the skull tightly, feeling its pulse quicken like a frantic heartbeat. Where it wants me to go. Luca grabbed her arm. You're letting it control you. No, she said, though she didn't fully believe it. It's showing me something, a memory, a place, a buried truth. The skull grew warmer. The whisper grew softer. The world around her began to blur at the edges. And Alina realized something even more terrifying than the creature chasing them. She wasn't holding the skull. The skull was holding her, and it had only just begun. The streets of Rome were quiet, yet every shadow seemed to twitch, stretch, and lean closer as Alina and Luca raced through narrow alleys, the cracked cobblestones echoing their frantic steps. Alina's hands were slick with sweat, yet the skull remained clasped to her chest, throbbing softly, almost like a second heartbeat. It felt aware. It knew where they were going, and every pulse urged her forward, faster, with a terrifying urgency. Luca stumbled beside her, gasping. Alina, tell me again why we're running toward something instead of away from it. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Every fiber of her being screamed that stopping even for a second would cost her more than life. It was not merely a thing beneath the pit anymore. That presence had followed them through streets, through the very bones of Rome, until it could seep no further. The skull pulsed harder now, an almost visible rhythm of light beneath its surface. Alina felt an image flare in her mind, a deep catacomb, untouched by man, miles beneath the city, lined with stone carvings, burning symbols, and iron chains coiled around empty sockets. She recognized it instinctively, though she had never been there. They're waiting for us. Down there, she whispered, almost to herself. What? Who? Luca asked, fear threading his voice. I don't know, she admitted, voice trembling. But I can feel it. The others, the ones the Romans tried to bind, they're still here, and they need me. They reached a narrow stairwell leading down beneath the city, ancient, rusted, almost forgotten. The skull pulsed stronger with every step Alina took. The air grew cold, the weight of centuries pressing down. Even the streetlights above seemed distant now, swallowed by the labyrinthine darkness. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched endlessly before them. The walls were etched with faint carving symbols, matching the burned fragments Alina had found in the pit. Her breath caught. Every mark seemed alive, twisting subtly as if reacting to her presence. The skull vibrated in her hands, nearly lifting from her grasp. She had never felt anything like it. Each pulse transmitted not just warmth, but memory images of suffering, betrayal, and endless imprisonment. She felt herself inside it, witnessing centuries of fear and rage firsthand. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the corridor, slow, metallic, dragging. Alina froze, every instinct screaming the thing had followed them. It had reconstructed itself, drawn by the pulse of the skull. "Don't stop," the skull whispered inside her mind. "Keep moving." "Inside your mind," Luca said in disbelief. "Eleno, what the hell is happening?" "I don't know," she shouted. But the whisper continued, coaxing her forward. She ran, clutching the skull, every step resonating with the vibrations from its surface. Behind them, the metallic sound grew louder, more deliberate. It was searching, calculating, methodical. Finally, the corridor opened into a vast subterranean chamber. Alina stopped, breathless. Her eyes widened in awe and terror. The chamber stretched for hundreds of feet. Walls carved with symbols and chains coiled across the floor like serpents of iron. Shadows moved impossibly fluid, though no one else was visible. The skull pulsed violently. Alina realized it was guiding her to the center. In the chamber's center stood a massive stone coffin, partially buried under dust and centuries of debris. Its surface bore the same burned inscriptions that had haunted Alina since the pit. And now, as she approached, she understood the coffin wasn't just a container, it was a seal. The air shifted. A cold, oppressive pressure pressed down, suffocating in its intensity. Alina could feel it not just in her lungs, but in her bones. The whisper had grown into a roar inside her mind. "Open it, complete it, finish what they tried to bind." Luca grabbed her shoulder. "Alina, step back. This isn't history. This is death." She shook her head, unable to break free of the pull. She could feel the soul inside the coffin, fragmented and angry, reaching for the skull in her hands. Every instinct screamed terror, yet the emotions flooding her mind were more complex than fear. They were grief, longing, anguish, centuries of torment condensed into a presence that had waited too long. Alina placed the skull atop the coffin. Immediately, the chains on the floor shivered. The inscriptions flared with an intense white-hot light. The air thickened, pressing against them like invisible hands. Shadows coiled along the walls, stretching toward the coffin. And then, with a sound like grinding stone and breaking bone, the coffin lid began to move. The thing inside didn't rise immediately. At first, it was a faint stir, a tremor, a whisper of movement. Then, a skeletal arm emerged, twisting unnaturally, wrapped in the rusted remnants of chains. Its fingers clawed toward the skull, but the object levitated slightly, glowing in response. "Alina, it's alive," Luca screamed, falling back. "Yes," she whispered, mesmerized and horrified. "But it's not just alive, it's remembering." The creature clawed upward, its broken jaw open in a silent scream. Alina realized something chilling. Its agony was unfinished. The Romans had separated the skull to prevent the body from becoming whole, but the skull itself had carried the consciousness, waiting for a host to release it. Now, the reunion was imminent. The shadows in the chamber writhed violently. The chains lifted off the floor, wrapping around the skeletal arms, tightening and constricting. The entity in the coffin convulsed, muscles twitching unnaturally as fragments of skin and sinew slowly reformed over its bones. Its chest rose and fell with the labor of centuries compressed into moments. Elena's knees buckled, her eyes filled with tears she didn't understand. Every heartbeat, every pulse of the skull, every vibration of the chamber communicated something raw and human. She could feel its memory, the love it had lost, the betrayals, the punishments, the eternal solitude. She whispered to it instinctively, words she didn't know she had in her. I see you. I hear you. I won't let them keep you silent anymore. The skull floated from her hands and slowly moved toward the coffin. The entity's hollow eyes focused, locking onto it. Then, in a display that was both horrifying and beautiful, the body reconstructed fully, skin, flesh, sinew, and bone knitted together seamlessly. The chains fell away, harmlessly clattering to the ground. The creature reached for Elena. She flinched, expecting death, but instead it reached and touched her shoulder gently. Its presence pressed warmth into her, flooding her with centuries of gratitude, sorrow, and relief. The whisper came again, faint now, almost human. Thank you. The skull rose slowly, then gently rotated in the air, before lowering itself onto the restored body's head. For a long moment, the entity stood fully whole, breathing softly, as though awakening from a long nightmare. Then it stepped backward, glancing at Elena and Luca with hollow yet human eyes. A single hand raised in farewell before it turned and walked into the shadows of the subterranean chamber, disappearing into the labyrinth of forgotten tunnels. The chamber grew still. The air cleared. The pressure lifted. Elena collapsed to her knees, sobbing, overwhelmed by the raw weight of what had just occurred. Luca fell beside her, speechless. She lifted the skull carefully. It was warm, but now peaceful. Its pulse was faint, almost human. It's over, Luca whispered. No, she said quietly. Not over. Not really. Some things, some souls, never truly leave us. But maybe, just maybe, they can be freed. The first light of dawn filtered through a small vent above. Dust motes danced in the air like tiny spirits released from centuries of imprisonment. The chains lay scattered across the stone floor, inert and cold. The inscriptions glowed faintly, then faded into memory. Elena carefully placed the skull back into its case, securing it. She felt its weight differently now, a curse, not a burden, but a reminder of the suffering, the persistence of memory, and the price of curiosity. As she and Luca climbed the ancient stairwell, emerging into the modern streets of Rome, she knew the city above carried on, oblivious, alive with everyday life. Yet beneath its streets, in the deep shadows of catacombs and forgotten pits, there were still whispers, shadows waiting, chains that could rattle again, secrets that refused to die. Elena glanced at the case one last time. The skull pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if it were breathing, and she understood the truth, terrifying and awe-inspiring. Some mysteries are never meant to be fully understood. Some curses never meant to be completely bound. And some souls will wait for eternity for release. Rome was quiet again, but the city had changed forever for those who could feel it. And deep beneath the ancient stones, the skull's pulse continued. Just once, faint, alive, waiting. And deep beneath the ancient stones, the skull's pulse continued, faint, alive, waiting. But now, in the silence of the tunnels, the pulse was no longer frantic. It was steady, measured, almost like a heartbeat, finally at peace. Alina traced her fingers over the case that contained it, feeling the warmth radiate faintly through the cloth. She understood something that hadn't been clear before. The skull had survived centuries, not to torment the living, but to endure until someone finally understood it, someone who could witness its story and honor it. The underground chamber was empty now, yet Alina could still sense the lingering presence of the entity that had been trapped there. It wasn't angry anymore. It had walked into the shadows, but it had left a memory in the air, an imprint of its life, suffering, and release. The chains that had once bound it to the earth were nothing more than scattered metal, cold and lifeless, like remnants of a nightmare finally ended. Luca knelt beside her, shaking, exhausted, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Alina, I can't believe what we just saw," he whispered. It was alive, and then it was gone, just like that. Alina exhaled, slowly, relief mixing with awe. "Not gone," she said quietly, "freed." Finally, she lifted the skull carefully. Its pulse was slower now, gentle, almost reassuring. "It trusted us. That's why we survived. That's why we're still here." The air in the tunnels felt lighter now, almost breathable, as if the centuries of oppression had lifted. Symbols on the walls glimmered faintly one last time, like the city itself was acknowledging the end of the curse. Alina realized that this place, this labyrinth of forgotten tombs and iron chains, was not just a site of horror, it was a monument to the lives of the forgotten, the punished, and the silenced. They began the long climb back to the surface. Each step was heavy with exhaustion, yet lighter with hope. When they finally emerged into the fresh air of Rome, the morning sun bathed the city in gold. The streets were bustling, as if nothing had happened below. Yet Alina and Luca saw the city differently now. They knew what rested beneath its cobblestones, what history had buried, and what could still awaken if forgotten. They returned to the research facility. Alina carefully stored the skull in a secure, climate-controlled chamber, documenting everything with meticulous detail. She and Luca worked in silence, their shared experience too immense for words. The weight of what they had witnessed, the terror, the sorrow, the liberation hung between them like a tangible presence. And deep beneath the ancient stones, the skull's pulse continued, faint, alive, waiting. But now, in the silence of the tunnels, the pulse was no longer frantic. It was steady, measured, almost like a heartbeat, finally at peace. Alina traced her fingers over the case that contained it, feeling the warmth radiate faintly through the cloth. She understood something that hadn't been clear before. The skull had survived centuries, not to torment the living, but to endure until someone finally understood it, someone who could witness its story and honor it. The underground chamber was empty now, yet Alina could still sense the lingering presence of the entity that had been trapped there. It wasn't angry anymore. It had walked into the shadows, but it had left a memory in the air, an imprint of its life, suffering, and release. The chains that had once bound it to the earth were nothing more than scattered metal, cold and lifeless, like remnants of a nightmare finally ended. Luca knelt beside her, shaking, exhausted, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Alina, I can't believe what we just saw," he whispered. It was alive, and then it was gone, just like that. Alina exhaled, slowly, relief mixing with awe. "Not gone," she said quietly, freed. Finally, she lifted the skull carefully. Its pulse was slower now, gentle, almost reassuring. "It trusted us. That's why we survived. That's why we're still here." The air in the tunnels felt lighter now, almost breathable, as if the centuries of oppression had lifted. Symbols on the walls glimmered faintly one last time, like the city itself was acknowledging the end of the curse. Alina realized that this place, this labyrinth of forgotten tombs and iron chains, was not just a site of horror, it was a monument to the lives of the forgotten, the punished, and the silenced. They began the long climb back to the surface. Each step was heavy with exhaustion, yet lighter with hope. When they finally emerged into the fresh air of Rome, the morning sun bathed the city in gold. The streets were bustling, as if nothing had happened below. Yet Alina and Luca saw the city differently now. They knew what rested beneath its cobblestones, what history had buried, and what could still awaken if forgotten. They returned to the research facility. Alina carefully stored the skull in a secure, climate-controlled chamber, documenting everything with meticulous detail. She and Luca worked in silence, their shared experience too immense for words. The weight of what they had witnessed, the terror, the sorrow, the liberation hung between them like a tangible presence. Weeks passed. Alina revisited the site only once more, ensuring the entrance to the catacombs was sealed properly. She walked through the ruins, noting the cracked stones and ancient carvings that had once held back an unthinkable force. She could feel echoes of the entity's presence, a soft reassurance that it was finally at peace. At night, when the city was quiet, Alina would sometimes feel a faint vibration from the sealed chamber. Not a threat, not a warning, but a heartbeat, a quiet reminder of what they had freed. A proof that even the most tortured souls could find release. Luca, once skeptical and fearful, became a steadfast partner in her work. Together, they catalogued other artifacts, carefully noting every symbol, every trace of ancient power. But they never again encountered a presence like that skull. Its story, though terrifying, had taught them something invaluable. Some mysteries are dangerous, not because they are evil, but because they are misunderstood, trapped by fear and cruelty. One evening, as Alina sat by the window of her apartment overlooking Rome, she held the skull carefully. Its hollow eye sockets seemed peaceful, almost human. She whispered softly, as though speaking to the centuries it had endured. "You are free now. Rest." The skull rested in her hands, warm, steady, pulsing faintly, alive not as a curse, but as a memory, a legacy, a reminder. The city stretched below her, alive with life, history, and possibility. And deep beneath the ancient stones, the pulse that had once carried centuries of torment continued, not in anger, not in rage, but in quiet, gentle life, finally at peace. Alina smiled softly, tears running down her cheeks. For the first time in decades, she felt the weight of history lift not with destruction, but with understanding. The shadows beneath Rome had been witnessed, honored, and released. And as dawn turned to morning, the city of Rome carried on, oblivious to the horrors and miracles hidden beneath it. But Alina knew the truth. Some legacies cannot be destroyed, some spirits cannot be silenced, and some mysteries, once freed, bring not fear but wisdom, respect, and hope. The skull's pulse slowed further, faint, steady, a rhythm that spoke of rest and eternity. And at last, Alina felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. The curse had ended. The story was complete, and the world, for now, was safe. The air in the old botanical garden was heavier than it should have been for a spring evening, thick with the scent of damp earth, moss, and flowers that seemed too vibrant to exist naturally. Alina moved carefully along the winding paths, the soles of her shoes crunching against gravel as she navigated past beds of exotic plants whose leaves twisted and shimmered in the dim lamplight. Something about this place had always been unsettling, though no one else seemed to notice. The gardeners spoke of ancient legends, whispering about plants that moved when unobserved, blooms that could drive people mad with their scent, but most dismissed it as old superstition. Yet tonight, Alina felt the garden watching her. A faint rustling came from the corner of the hedged labyrinth. She froze. No wind stirred the branches. No small animal should have been there. Yet the noise persisted, deliberate, rhythmic, like soft footsteps pacing just out of sight. Her pulse quickened. A thrill ran through her, not fear exactly, but something sharper, a primal curiosity that demanded she follow the sound. The deeper she walked into the garden, the more unnatural the shadows became. Vines hung low, twisting as if reaching toward her. The flowers were brilliant, almost too bright, their colors iridescent under the faint glow of gas lamps. She bent closer to examine a crimson bloom that pulsed faintly in the moonlight, its petals almost breathing. Her fingers brushed against it, and a shiver ran up her arm, not from cold, but from awareness. The plant seemed aware of her touch, recoiling subtly, then relaxing as though satisfied she had not harmed it. "Impossible," she whispered, shaking her head. Yet the sensation lingered, a whisper of consciousness beneath the petals. It was as though the garden itself breathed, thought, and waited. She had come here to study history, to trace the lineage of plants that had been brought from distant continents centuries ago. Yet what she found now transcended science. This was alive in ways no textbook could explain. A sudden snapping sound startled her, and she spun to see a shadow detach itself from the far end of the hedge maze. It moved unnaturally smoothly, silently, till it halted just at the edge of the faint lamplight. Alina could not make out features, only the shape of a person, tall, draped in a coat that shimmered like it was woven from the night itself. The figure lifted a hand, beckoning her forward, slow and deliberate. Her heart pounded. Rational thought screamed for her to turn back, yet an invisible thread tugged at her, drawing her closer. She followed cautiously, the gravel crunching underfoot sounding deafening in the stillness. Every instinct warned her to flee, but something about the figure's movement, the deliberate patience, and the subtle knowledge in its posture told her it was not malevolent, at least not in the way humans understood malevolence. "Who's there?" she called softly, though her voice shook. No reply came, yet the figure stepped aside, revealing a narrow path veiled in overgrown ferns. Beyond it, the air shimmered faintly, as though the garden bent light differently there. A faint hum filled her ears, low and vibrating, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. She inhaled, and the smell of the flowers shifted, heavy, intoxicating, almost sweet enough to make her dizzy. She took another step forward, then another, and as she entered the veiled path, the world seemed to tilt. The familiar garden disappeared behind her. The hedges and beds twisted into unfamiliar configurations. Paths she had walked before no longer existed. It was as if the garden had reassembled itself around her. The flowers now glowed with inner light, some petals opening to reveal geometric patterns that should not have existed in nature. Their leaves whispered, brushing against her skin with an almost sentient grace. Suddenly, the humming intensified. From the shadows, something moved. A small, delicate vine stretched toward her ankle, curling and pulsing, almost like it was alive in its own consciousness. Alina jumped back, but the vine recoiled, leaving behind a faint trail of luminescent spores that floated in the air, catching the moonlight. She realized with a shock that the spores formed letter-tiny glowing runes that shimmered for only a heartbeat before fading. She leaned closer. The pattern was almost impossible to read, yet a single word emerged in her mind. Not through sight, but through thought itself. Watch. A shiver ran down her spine. The garden was not just alive. It was watching, thinking, aware. And somehow it knew she was here for reasons beyond mere curiosity. From the deeper shadows, the figure emerged again, stepping forward now fully into the light. Alina could finally see it not as a human, not quite, but as a form woven from both flesh and foliage. The edges of its body blurred, intertwining with creeping ivy and flowering vines, a seamless fusion of plant and human. Its eyes, impossibly deep and green, fixed on her with calm intensity. "You seek the garden's history," it said, voice like wind rustling leaves. "But history is not what you think. What you see in books is only a shadow. What you touch in soil is only a trace. The truth is older, deeper, dangerous." Alina's throat went dry. "Who? What are you?" "I am its guardian," the figure replied. "Or perhaps its prisoner. For centuries we have waited. The botanical gardens hold secrets humanity was never meant to know. Plants are not silent. They remember, they communicate, they judge, and some have power that surpasses your understanding." Alina stepped closer, drawn despite her fear. "Show me. I need to understand." The guardian's gaze softened slightly. "To understand, you must see beyond your own senses. You must touch, taste, and breathe the memory embedded in every root, every petal, every seed. But beware, once you enter the truth, you cannot unsee it. The garden does not forgive ignorance." With a gesture, the guardian beckoned her to a central clearing. Here, enormous trees rose in impossibly straight lines, their roots twisting above ground, forming patterns like veins or circuitry. Flowers of colors she could not name pulsed faintly with light, and in the center, a massive fountain overflowed not with water, but with glowing sap, thick and viscous, radiating heat and an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Alina approached, hands trembling, drawn to the sap as though it were alive. When her fingers touched it, a rush of images surged into her mind, visions of explorers who had planted exotic seeds centuries ago. Their hopes, fears, and greed imprinted into the genetic memory of the plants themselves. She saw gardeners disappearing, entangled by vines that would vanish only when the humans no longer resisted, their souls preserved in the foliage. She saw flowers that could bend perception, trees that whispered lies and truths alike, and seeds that carried both life and death, depending on who tended them. The guardian's voice echoed in her mind. "Every plant here holds a story. Every story holds power. And some, hidden, have been waiting to awaken." Alina's vision sharpened. She saw one tree, ancient beyond comprehension, its trunk carved with symbols that pulsed with a soft, eerie light. The guardian knelt beside it, touching the bark. Immediately, the tree shivered. Roots crawled across the clearing like fingers, lifting her slightly off the ground. A seed fell from the branches. It floated in the air, glowing, and as she reached for it, she felt her mind stretch to accommodate centuries of knowledge of secrets humanity had no right to grasp. Her pulse thundered. Emotion surged, fear, longing, and sorrow all at once. The garden itself felt alive in her bones. The guardian's gaze softened again. This is why we endure, to ensure only those who respect the balance can learn, to ensure the secrets do not destroy the world. Alina nodded, tears streaming. I understand. I will respect it. I will protect it. The guardian inclined its head, fading slowly into the flora, leaving Alina alone in the clearing. She held the glowing seed in her hands, feeling the weight of centuries of knowledge, grief, and hope. The garden around her sighed, a soft whisper of approval. And for the first time, she realized she was not merely a visitor here. She was a witness, a keeper, a part of the garden's living history. The night deepened. The whispering leaves and glowing petals reminded her that the garden's secrets were alive, eternal, and patient. They would wait, watch, and judge. Humanity might return, curiosity might awaken again, and the garden would respond not with malice, but with the meticulous patience of something far older and wiser than herself. And in that moment, Alina understood the truth. Botanical gardens are not just places of beauty and study. They are archives of memory, prisons of power, and witnesses of history. They are alive, they are conscious, and some secrets, if unearthed recklessly, could never be contained. But she had seen, and she had been chosen. She would honor it. And as she walked back through the moonlit paths, the flowers seemed to bow gently, the vines shifted with silent grace, and somewhere, deep beneath the roots, something pulsed with life faint but unbroken, waiting for the next soul who dared to seek the truth. Alina paused at the edge of the central clearing, the glowing seed cradled carefully in her hands. The garden seemed to exhale around her, a soft rustling of leaves that felt like whispers of approval or, perhaps, caution. She knelt to examine the seed closer, noting the intricate patterns etched across its surface. They were not random. They resembled veins, like miniature rivers of light, shifting subtly under her gaze. The seed throbbed with a rhythm, almost alive, almost like it was breathing. Her fingers trembled. She realized with sudden clarity that this seed carried not just the memory of a single plant, but the essence of the garden itself, fall, its history, all its secrets, all its latent power compressed into a single vessel. One careless touch, one mistake in handling it, and the consequences could echo far beyond the garden walls. A sudden movement from the hedges made her spin. Shadows stretched and warped unnaturally as a dark figure emerged, a man this time, draped in the tattered remains of centuries-old robes, his eyes glinting with something between obsession and madness. He stopped a few feet away, staring at the seed. "Alina Maresi," he said, his voice dry, like dead leaves crumbling. "You shouldn't have come here." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I am the guardian before your time," he said, his gaze flicking over the garden. "Before your modern world discovered these secrets, I tended this place. I studied it. I learned its whispers, and I tried to control them. But control is an illusion. Knowledge is a burden. And now you've awakened it again." Alina tightened her grip on the seed. "Awakened what?" "I haven't done anything." The man shook his head slowly, his eyes wide with fear and awe. "The garden itself, Alina. You've awakened the consciousness that never sleeps. Every flower, every root, every tree remembers, and now it knows that you are here." The leaves around them stirred violently. Vines slithered along the ground, some inching toward her feet, some coiling in the air as though tasting the presence of the intruder. The flower's petals opened wider, revealing patterns that shifted, almost hypnotically, like living hieroglyphics. Elena's pulse raced as the hum she had first felt earlier returned, low, deep, almost like a heartbeat reverberating through the earth. The old guardian, this man who had been alive in ways she could not comprehend, stepped closer. You think you can take the seed, understand it, leave unchanged. The garden demands witnesses, yes, but it also demands sacrifice. You must give something to receive its knowledge. Elena's breath hitched. What do you mean? Sacrifice? What? The hum grew louder. The air thickened, making it hard to draw a full breath. The flowers around them began to lean closer, their luminescent petals glowing brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the seed in her hands. Elena realized that the garden was alive, not just in a metaphorical sense. It was sentient, reacting to emotion, measuring intent, judging character. And it was aware of her fear, her awe, her curiosity. You must leave something of yourself, the guardian said. A memory, a thought, a fragment of your being. Only then can you carry the seed's truth without destroying yourself. Elena's mind reeled. She thought of her past, of memories she had buried to survive, of loss, of failures, of moments of shame. She realized instinctively that the garden did not merely demand physical offerings. It demanded honesty, vulnerability, and the essence of the soul itself. Tears blurred her vision. She knelt in the glowing sap, holding the seed above the luminous pool at the fountain's center. I give you this, she whispered, closing her eyes and letting the raw, unfiltered memories of her life pour into the seed. Fear, grief, love, hope, despair of it flowed from her consciousness, embedding itself into the glowing veins of the tiny vessel. The seed shuddered violently, then brightened, almost painfully so. Elena screamed, a sound not entirely of pain, but of release. The vines recoiled, the flowers quivered, and the wind of the garden swirled around her, lifting her hair and the hems of her coat in a sudden, gentle storm. She felt her mind expand, filled with the whispers of centuries, with knowledge no human mind could normally contain. When she opened her eyes, everything had changed. The garden was no longer dark and shadowed. It was alive in a way that was undeniable, radiant with energy that pulsed through every root, every leaf, every petal. The guardian looked at her, his expression softened, almost reverent. You have done what few could, he said quietly. You have become part of the garden, and it has accepted you. But know this, the knowledge you carry is immense. Guard it, respect it, and never underestimate what curiosity can awaken. Elena held the seed close, feeling its steady pulse now, gentle and reassuring. The hum had subsided into a low, constant presence, like a heartbeat in the ground beneath her feet. She understood fully that the garden was not just a repository of plants. It was a living library, a conscious archive of history, memory, and life itself. She rose slowly, turning to leave the clearing. The vines parted respectfully, flowers leaning in silent acknowledgement. The shadows that had once threatened her now seemed protective, guiding her along the paths she had walked before but never truly seen. The man, the former guardian, faded into the greenery, leaving her alone but not abandoned. Elena understood that she had inherited a responsibility far greater than herself, stewardship over secrets that were alive, waiting, and eternally vigilant. When she emerged from the garden gates, the city was quiet, bathed in early morning light. The streets of her modern world looked the same, yet she felt different. The pulse of the garden, the weight of centuries of knowledge and life, now beat quietly within her. every plant she passed on the streets, every garden she glimpsed from a window, every tree along the avenues seemed to resonate faintly with that hidden consciousness she had touched. Alina smiled softly, feeling a profound mixture of awe, humility, and purpose. She knew the botanical gardens held stories, but she had learned that the stories were far more alive, far more sentient, and far more powerful than any human mind had imagined. And as she walked into the awakening city, she felt the faint, rhythmic pulse of the garden beneath the stones, in the soil, in the roots that twisted unseen beneath Rome. It was a pulse that promised vigilance, knowledge, and the eternal whisper of life, waiting to be discovered, always watching, always remembering, always alive. Alina understood now that the garden's secret history would never truly end. It would continue in the shadows, in the soil, in the quiet moments when the world thought itself at rest. And she, a witness and guardian, would carry that living truth, forever curious, forever aware, and forever changed.